Welcome to Speaking Influence. This is the live stream of the show today, and I'm very happy to be talking about something that is a critical skill in terms of having influence and persuasion on any platform. Certainly one that is critical in the professional world if you want to be as influential and persuasive as possible. And if you are in professions where you have to speak or present or do any kind of presentation in front of anyone else, or you have to meet clients, you have to communicate in some way, then your speaking skills are going to be essential to have them as good and as honed as possible. Now, we've already had amazing guests on the show who help us to communicate more clearly. Today is no exception. We are about to speak to somebody who helps people to be calmer, to be more confident, and to have more clarity and clarity in the message, and also really have that credibility factor when you're out there as well. So that if that's what you want, and you want to be a better communicator, and you want to be calm, have confidence and credibility on any platform, then you are in the right place as we speak very shortly to my guest, Peter George. Join us in a few moments. Welcome to Speaking Influence, the show about persuasive presentation skills and ethical influence for today's business leaders. Many podcasters now agree that live streaming is the future of podcasting. If you want to get started with live streaming, my recommendation and the channel I use is restream.io. Check the link in the show notes, and after your first live stream, you will receive a $10 Restream cashback. Peter, welcome to Speaking Influence.
Thanks, Johnny. Pleasure to be here.
I've been looking forward to speaking to you. We had a chat a little while back whilst we were putting an episode together, and I knew that you were going to be someone who I was very much looking forward to having on the show, and you have a great story. Before we get into hearing more about you, I want to ask you this, just to find out a bit more about what kind of person you are. If you could have any superpower at all, which one would you have and why?
Any superpower at all? I think it would be the ability to fly. And the reason is just so to get around the world more quickly, experience more cultures, more people, more things. I think that would be an awesome one to have.
I really like that. I always wanted to fly when I was a kid, and I don't know if you've ever had those flying dreams where it kind of feels very real and you're like you're really flying. I've had those, and those ones I think, oh, I wish I could have that more often. I wish I could have that experience in my life. Who knows? Maybe technology will give us those gifts. I think we're already on the way to that, being able to have that experience, that individual flight. Who knows what the future will bring? Fantastic. Peter, we're not here to talk about superpowers so much, although in a sense we are. We're here to talk about a different kind of superpower, which is one of being able to have more confidence, be better communicators, have more credibility on the stage. And this is what you specialize in. Having had some communication issues in your own childhood, tell us a bit about that, about your experience and how you came to be working with people in their speaking and presentations.
I grew up in Providence, Rhode Island in the U.S., and great time to grow up in the 60s. But even then, as a 9-year-old boy with a lisp and a stutter, you would get picked on. And I did two things extremely well to keep me from getting picked on. One was I kept my mouth shut. I didn't speak other than to my close friends and my family, of course, but not in school, not on other occasions. And I became very proficient in sports because if you were good in sports, you didn't get picked on. And I stayed that way all the way through school till I got out of school and went to work in the corporate world. And I worked for one of the world's largest companies, one of the best known companies. And I learned when I was there that to progress in my career, I had to learn how to present and present well. And that was a fairly long struggle because I tried to do it on my own at first, reading books, implementing what I read. And the problem I found with that was, as much as that helped, I didn't get feedback. Right. So then I went to get training, first group training. And when I got comfortable with that, I then went and worked with someone one-on-one. And that helped me a great deal. And then after I left the corporate world and went out and opened my own company, which was a publishing company, I realized to help that company flourish, again, I had to present and present well.
Yeah.
So I studied and studied and studied, and I ended up speaking quite a bit. For 15 years, I was on the road, not quite half the year, but close to it, speaking uh, more times than I'd like to admit to myself. And after 15 years, I said, I'm done with that. It's too much traveling and the like. My wife said, you got to learn to say no. And with me, it's either black and white. And I just said no to everything. But at that point, it was like, well, what do you want to do with the rest of your life? Still had the publishing company, although we were about to sell that. And uh, I just said, well, I loved helping other speakers along the way. I'm going to do that. And for the last 17 years, I've been building that business. And that's what I'll be doing really for the rest of my life.
And it's a great area to be working in, one that I love myself. What I wonder for you then is, we talk as speakers about how important public speaking is. And I find it curious that someone like Warren Buffett, for example, has said that his experience of learning public speaking has been foundational to his success. And he's someone who probably people think, well, other than he does like this annual presentation, he probably doesn't really need to do that much public speaking or presentation work. So why would someone like him say that? And I'm often saying that to people, this is no longer an optional skill for you in the professional world. What's your take on the importance of presentation skills and public speaking in the modern professional world?
There are a few things more important. And the fact that it's still called a soft skill, and leadership skills in general are called soft skills, and of course the hard skills being what you actually do for a living, I think that's a misnomer. I think it's actually a power skill. And that can separate you from the others when you're getting a job. It can separate you from others when promotions are available to start your own company and promote it, whatever it might be. It's such a powerful skill that the vast majority of the people do not have. And when you take Warren Buffett's quote, and this is used quite often, is he said of all the investments he's ever made, his public speaking course was arguably the best investment and the greatest investment he ever made. This is a man whose every investment is scrutinized and analyzed and torn apart. And he knows when he speaks, even locally, and locally I mean within the company, people move and make huge investments, changes, or directives based on what he says. It must be clear, it must be concise, and it has to resonate with those he's speaking to. And he knew that at a very young age.
Yeah. And so for anyone who's in professional life now, I agree with you. I think it is a power skill. I think it's an essential skill rather than, whilst it's still, communication still comes under the general banner of soft skills. I think it's a poor label for it because it's perhaps misleading, as it doesn't seem like that. Soft skills doesn't sound like something you need to have. There's no real, even leadership skills doesn't seem like something you need to have.
Yeah, it makes it sound optional.
Yeah, and it's absolutely not. And this is one thing I think people are finding. Like, I don't know about your experience, but a lot of the people who I work with have come through ranks of business or built their own businesses. And no one has ever suggested to them that they should get some training in leadership or some public speaking training, things like that. So they find themselves in a position where their communication isn't capable of meeting the demands of the level that they're at. And so they're coming maybe a bit late for help, which, better late than never, but better to have those skills as you progress, and probably progress faster, than to try and play catch up when you realize that you're missing something that's really essential, right?
I worked with a president of a company, and it's a company that he travels worldwide to speak to their locations. They have locations all over the world. 55 years old, and he contacted me for help. So it's never too late to start. He realized he was deficient in public speaking and communication skills and wanted to hone those. And I was very surprised when I spoke to him because he was a pretty good communicator, but he wanted to be even better. Because again, he knew that the better he could be, the more effective he could be. And one of the things he told me was, it's not just to help me, it's to help those I communicate with. because what happens is if he doesn't communicate well, they might not carry out what he needs or is asking for precisely or accurately. They may think it's something else, and that hurts both them and, of course, the company's effectiveness and efficiencies.
Yeah. And this is perhaps one of the big fears that people have in business life and professional life about speaking, that if they are on some kind of platform or communicating to groups, especially to large groups, and they don't have those skills, if they can't get up there and be their business industry's equivalent of Steve Jobs or whatever, and inspiring people and people going, oh, wow, that was such an amazing talk. Anything less than that, and they're thinking, well, people are going to think I'm not good at this, or that I'm not a good communicator, or maybe feel uninspired and demotivated because of my speech or presentation. At best, no, they're just going to think less of me. They're going to think that I'm not such a good leader. Do you think that's true, that that's what's going on with people?
Oh, 100%. And, the leaders, whether it's the president or any position in a company, higher position in a company, they don't want people saying, oh my God, how did this woman get this job? Because it reflects to the others on their skills. Now, one may have nothing to do with the other. They might be incredibly gifted at what they do for a living, but they will also be judged, however, and convey enthusiasm and confidence and the like based on how they communicate with those others.
Yeah. One of the things that you help people with particularly is confidence around this. Like, the confidence would be getting over this fear of it, but not just getting over the fear of it, actually appearing confident when you're speaking. What are the main differences in terms of public speaking and presentations between somebody who is confident and someone who isn't?
More than the conscious level, it's the unconscious level. Some scientists say that you have 3 seconds to establish confidence with people you're communicating with. And that's not done on the conscious level. That's not people sitting there saying, oh, I like the way she's standing. It looks confident, therefore I have confidence in her. It's done on an unconscious level. And that's one of the mistakes people make or don't realize, is that we believe that we're just speaking on a conscious level, that people are hearing our words and the tone of our voice and the like. But so much of our communication is done on the unconscious level. People may not realize why they are engaged with you or not. Someone could walk away and say, that guy, Peter, that Johnny just had on there on the live stream, I don't know why, but I just wasn't comfortable with him. That would be on an unconscious level. I didn't look confident to them. I didn't sound confident to them. Much of what people are looking for is that confidence, because if they're not if they don't believe we have confidence in ourselves, why should they have confidence in what we're saying?
Yeah, I agree with that. And I've seen a lot of people try to combat that lack of confidence in some, what I would call, unfortunate ways. Maybe you've seen some of this, I don't know, but they're either trying to go very hyper and be super extrovert with their presenting, and it can be almost a bit overpowering. Like, maybe it seems like they've taken some sort of speed or something like that to get themselves pumped up, and that often seems fake. If that's not how they naturally are, people do pick up on that, I think, quite quickly. One thing that I was thinking of whilst you were speaking, which I saw, and I think I may have mentioned it on the show before, in the UK government, it seems that they maybe had some kind of body language advisor, and to help them look more confident, they're telling them you need to stand confident, like hands on hips or arms crossed, with wide leg posture. And that was like a body confidence. And I've heard that from body language experts. But what they ended up doing was all these photos where they've got these really unnatural leg stances, almost like they're going into the splits to look confident. It doesn't look confident. It just looks ridiculous. And so these things that people just try and do to compensate for this, rather than actually deal with the cause, it's actually dealing with the surface stuff, looking or seeming confident, rather than actually working on the being confident.
Exactly. And it can be a self-fulfilling prophecy. Some of your body language if you work on that, will help you feel more confident, and therefore you convey that confidence. And when you feel others having confidence in you, of course, now it just rises and rises and goes back and forth. And that's what you're looking for. But I laughed when you talked about that stance, because I see men do that. Women, you generally don't see do it. But, I ask my clients to stand up straight, put centered weight on both legs, feet about hip or shoulder width apart, whatever's more comfortable for them. But sometimes you see men who will do that wide stance. And I think the only time you should stand that way in life is when a policeman has you pushed up against his car. And he's
I
going to
agree.
frisk you. That's the only time in life your legs should be spread that far apart. And if you think about it, Johnny, why are they asking you to spread your legs that far apart? It's so you can't move. You actually have to move before you can move to attack them. And they're doing that. So that makes that a submissive pose. And a submissive pose is not a confident pose.
Right.
So they're doing actually just the opposite. And I can't believe that the people they were having stand that way felt natural.
I'm sure they didn't, and I think that comes across if you look up on Google images of UK government with their legs a bit too far apart in a power stance, you'll see what I'm talking about. But yeah, I think it was just some unfortunate advice that they were trying to give this air of confidence and how they were looking. And I don't think they were the only people that are doing it. And for sure, you see people in all sorts of forms compensating for perhaps a lack of confidence, or trying to create that image of confidence in some unfortunate ways. Where does confidence really come from, especially when you're doing your public speaking?
It like most things, it comes from within. And I can, or anybody else can, help them try to establish that, but it comes from within. And I truly believe confidence comes from competence. And when you get more competent in what you're trying to do, in this case, communicate more effectively, then that confidence starts to build. And my greatest benefit to people who hire me is not learning public speaking skills. It's the confidence they gain that then permeates various aspects of their lives. So I may train public speaking skills. People might get better at that. But you see, no matter who it is, no matter what level of life they're in, that bulb go off at one point when confidence just turns on at a level they never expected. And when I see that, they're set to go. I could go out and get hit by a bus, and they might not get the final workings of public speaking, but that confidence will bring them over the top.
I would often say to people that I think there are some different kinds of confidence. One is kind of like a confident outlook, where you have an expectation of things going well. I think that's a good thing to have, but not everyone has that. But I think for most people, confidence comes from experience and from practice. And similar to what you're saying, putting in the work, putting in the time to do this. You don't generally start off being confident at something you don't know how to do. So it takes some time to build that. And to think that you can just start off and go on a stage or a platform for the first time and speak to a board or to an organization or a networking meeting and be confident the first time you do it, maybe you can seem confident if that's something that comes easily to you, but there's no reason why you should be confident the first time you do it. But also, you don't want to be a wreck. You don't want to be a bag of nerves. But if you've put in some work, if you've put in some practice, you at least have a level of confidence that you should be prepared to do what you do. And in my experience, one of the reasons why people don't have that when they're getting started is because they don't really want to do the work. They don't do the practice time. They kind of think, well, I'll wing it. I'll be okay. And that doesn't always work out very well for people. In fact, often that's the time when people do get up onto a platform, maybe they're doing a live Zoom or something like this, perhaps, or maybe they're doing an actual in-person event, and they take to the platform, and everything they were going to say, everything they have planned, suddenly flies out of their head. once they're faced with the reality of the situation, and things start to go a bit wrong from there. Even as an experienced speaker or presenter, sometimes things can just escape you, and the more you try and chase after them, the further away they get. But if you haven't done the preparation and the work for what you're going to do, then you're going to find that that's going to happen, and that will damage confidence rather than increase it.
You're right on so many points there. A lot of us believe that since we've been speaking since we were about 16 months old, and that we know our job or what it is we want to speak about, that we're good to go. They don't understand that public speaking is not about talking. Public speaking is about conveying a message that others willingly will receive. They open up their minds, their hearts, their soul, whatever it might be, to receive that and digest and internalize that information. That's a skill. That's a learned skill. It comes naturally to very few people. And we have to learn how to do that. Otherwise, we're just talking. And I like to say that the Japanese have a word. When you know what you want to say and you have the guts to get up in front of people and do it, the Japanese have a word for that, one single word for that. Any idea what it is?
Is it banzai? I don't know.
No, karaoke.
Aha,
when you know the words and you got the guts to get up in front of people, it's called karaoke. Now, of course, we're talking about singing, but I like to think unless your audience has had 3 beers and a shot, you're not very good. And it's the same thing when we get up and say, well, I know my business. I know my job. I know the nuts and bolts of my business. I can get up there and talk about it. Well, that's great, but that doesn't mean you're communicating. That means you're showing up and throwing up, and that's about it. And that's unfortunate because we do have information. Every single one of us has information we can share that'll benefit others, either in our jobs or as human beings. And so much of it gets lost in the airwaves because we don't know how to communicate and engage others.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I try and impress on people as much as possible these days is that we are in this phase of shifting through to more artificial intelligence, more robots. Like more and more jobs are going to disappear as we shift more into algorithms and robots being able to do the things that many of us can do. And in some ways, that's a really good thing. But in other ways, it's going to create a lot of redundancy in terms of jobs. Whilst there may be other jobs that will come up, and probably many of the jobs of the future, we don't even know what they're going to be yet. I do still think that one of the things that isn't going to go anywhere is human to human, person to person communication, and one-to-one, one-to-many, whatever that may be. And I know from people who kind of look into these things and predict what's going to happen in the professional markets, that a lot of the prediction is that education and entertainment and those combinations, crossovers of those, are going to be areas in which we will not be replaced by algorithms and robots, because we want that human connection and we want to have that. And those already come under communication skills. So when people sort of think, well, how important really is this? When we say it's essential, this is how essential it is. Like, if you want to stay relevant in the professional world now, this is something that you have to have. And if your job or your career doesn't involve some level of communication, if you could be replaced by a robot or an algorithm, there's every chance that at some point you will.
Exactly. And a lot of people don't realize what public speaking is. Public speaking to a lot of people is, well, there's going to be 50 or 100 or 1,000 people out there. No, it can be one person across a desk. It can be 10 people in a conference room. And yes, it could be 1,000 people in an auditorium. But if you're speaking to another human being, it's public speaking. And people shy away from it, thinking it's just large crowds. Like, no, learn how to communicate with even one other person, your significant other, your kids. It all matters. Your tone of voice with your kids. We all know tone of voice makes a difference with our children. Unfortunately, we might use those tones incorrectly, and the kids react a way we don't want them to, or didn't anticipate them reacting that way. And then we're upset.
Yeah.
That they're being obstinate teenagers. And there's so much that goes into it. There's so much science that goes into the art of public speaking. It is a marriage of the two.
Yeah,
Even
definitely.
even to the point, Johnny, I like to make with my clients is that the human brain does not generally do the calculation of A plus B equals C. And quite often in shorthand, with it, whether it's someone in our families or someone at work or wherever, or a crowd we're speaking to, we're using shorthand. We say A plus B and we assume they're deriving equals C. Well, the brain doesn't necessarily do that. So that's just one of the things you have to learn about communicating with others, is providing with them what you want to do. It's like speaking to children. And I remember those days, especially my daughter. You'd walk by her room, there'd be clothes all over the floor, and she's a teenager, and I'd walk up to her and say, Erica, get the clothes up off the floor. Half hour later, I'd go by her room, and the clothes were up off the floor onto the bed in a heap. And I'd go up to her and say, that's not what I asked you to do or told you to do. And she said, yes, it is. And at the time, I'm like, oh my God, it's a teenage girl driving me crazy. And the fact was, her brain did not say, put the clean clothes in the closet or the drawers or whatever, and the dirty clothes in the hamper. She did exactly what I said.
Yeah.
So learning to communicate is actually learning how others are going to receive your message.
Well, there's always that thing of there's some expectation. I think back to myself as a teenager, although it's some time ago, that's probably what I would have done as well. And there would have been part of me that knew that doing it that way was going to annoy my dad. So there's that as well. But yeah, there's you did probably understand the communication, but you chose to take it literally because, well, that's what you said. And because you can say that. Yeah, we probably all have those experiences. But yeah, communication is key. One of the things that you say in some of the stuff you have it on your site and your promotional materials is about helping people to be calm, which is not something I always hear public speaking coaches and trainers talking about. And you have a very nice air of calmness around you, Peter, as well. How important is that, and why do you choose to focus on that calm side?
Other than the saleability of that word, the reason with helping people is being calm takes them an awful long way down the road of communicating well. And it's no different than any performer on stage. It's no different than any athlete. Their nerves are racing. Adrenaline is just zooming through their bodies and their brain. All that's happening, and it's learning to take that and control it or manage it. And people say, well, I want to get over my nerves. I'm like, no, you really don't. People think they do. I'm like, no, what we want to do, because being nervous and being energized, your body does the same thing. Adrenaline's running through your body. It's really what you label it as. If I'm not used to public speaking, I'm going to say I'm nervous, if not scared to death. If I am used to public speaking, then it becomes, man, I'm in the zone. I'm psyched. I want to do this. And that's taking that nervous energy and channeling it into positive energy. And when you can do that, you become calmer.
Yeah.
So pick the sport, the person who wants the ball at the last second and all those things, they have that same energy. They're just channeling it into positive energy. And they have confidence that they're going to do what they need to do. So they're calm. You hear athletes all the time say, when they're in the zone, everything slows down. They see everything happen in slow motion, and they're in complete control as much as possible.
Yeah.
And that's what I want for my clients, is not to get rid of the nerves. I want that energy in them. I just want them to see it differently and use it differently. And that brings a calmness to you. And that makes it a huge difference to you. But more importantly, it makes a huge difference to those who are listening to you.
Yeah. That reframe on excitement rather than fear, it was critical to me, and it's one that I have passed along to many people in my years of teaching public speaking as well, in that for me, I can remember my first ever speaker training being terrified, especially when it was coming to the final delivery where you were getting up in front of a whole room full of people to deliver what you've been working on all week as a presentation. And I was absolutely terrified. And just before that, one of the trainers who was there said to me, well, you look like you're about to fill your underwear. And I was like, yeah, it feels a bit like that right now. And he said, well, how do you normally feel when you're really excited? And I say, well, my heart's racing, and sometimes maybe feel a bit shallow breathing and a bit pumped up, and brain racing, all that kind of stuff. I said, well, how is that very much like what you're feeling now? I said, yeah. So how do you know you're not excited? That's a very good question. And it's one that I think partly because I was thinking about the answer to that question, I was able to go and deliver the presentation really well. But after that, I started thinking, yeah, I'm excited about this. And I do think that reframe was where my passion for public speaking really was born as well. And thinking, actually, I enjoy this. This excites me. This does get me emotional about it because I can do something with this. And that is a critical reframe for people on that fear of public speaking. It's like, it is actually an exciting, like jumping out of a plane, although it's very different experiences. But it's terrifying and exciting at the same time.
Right. An adrenaline rush is an adrenaline rush.
Yeah.
It just is. I used to drive high-speed motorcycles. Fastest I ever went was 163 miles an hour. Ooh. And you have to have respect for the motorcycle. You have to have respect at what can happen and what you're doing. But it has to be excitement. If you're nervous, there's going to be a problem. Mm. You have to channel it into excitement and having that calmness about you. Even at those speeds. Yeah, your adrenaline's flying, and it needs to for you to handle the bike. But I was thinking of jumping out of a plane too. Terrifying. But people do it over and over and over again for a reason. It's that rush. I had a client who came to me once who was petrified of public speaking. And I mean petrified. And she had to go on television shows because she invented something. And when we were done working, I was still coaching a little bit, but we had done the bulk of it. And it was time for her to go on the television shows. And these are national shows. I said to her, one of three things are going to happen. You are either going to be done and go, thank God that's done. I never want to do it again. And it was as horrible as I thought it was going to be. Or you're going to be done and saying, that was awesome. And I never want to do it again. Or you're going to be done and saying, that was awesome. I can't wait. And she said, nah, it's going to be one of the first two. I never want to do this again. When she was done, it was the third one. I can't wait to do this again.
Yeah, that's great.
She loved how it felt.
Yeah, and I think many people discover that about themselves when they get into this. And there's a lot of power in being able to communicate well and to be able to ultimately change hearts and minds and make positive impact in the world. And that's why I said at the start about it being a different kind of superpower. It's like, if I can choose a superpower, I'll choose the one I have, which is to be able to change people's minds or to make people see the world in a slightly different way, or to at least prompt people to think about something and challenge their preconceived ideas, or maybe look at there could be another way of thinking about this or another approach to this. That is a real superpower to me, one that everybody has access to, and probably the ones that really do make the bigger difference in terms of changing the world. It's like, you want to save the world, it's like get onto a platform, get up and speak. There are people who do that, and we see throughout history that's always been the case. The people who have made the biggest impacts have been the ones who have been, regardless of their level of communication ability, they have taken to a platform and done that. We saw it with MLK and the civil rights movement. We see it maybe somewhat now with people like Greta Thunberg and the environmental movement as well. And it's always the case that the real change comes from people who get up there and exercise that superpower of communication and actually creating understanding and new ways of thinking for people.
It truly makes a difference. You need the exposure. You have to lead. If you want to make a change, generally, you have to lead others. And to lead others, you have to be able to communicate effectively.
Yeah.
Simple as that. We can go into all other aspects of it, but it's as simple as that. Leaders communicate effectively.
What do you think actually establishes that leadership credibility in people? Like what do you think people look out for, or what do you look out for as a speaker and speaker trainer that says this is leadership?
One of the things I teach, and most public speaking coaches do, but I put a huge emphasis on this in every part, every session, I bring this back. And I think people who lead well understand this, even if they don't even recognize it, is that they know it's not about them. And so many of us try to make it about us. I'm standing here in the limelight, right? I'm up here on stage. I'm in front of the room. I'm at the head of the table in the conference room, whatever it might be. We think it's about us, and it's never about us. Never. It's about who we're talking to, who we're communicating with. It's always about the audience. And I believe leaders know that. They have empathy. They can put themselves in their employee's shoes, whatever it may be. They have that ability. And it's either innate, maybe not, or learned. And it's probably learned. Somewhere along the line, they realize that that's very effective. And I always think metaphorically as speakers, it's wrong that we're in the light and the audience is in the dark. Metaphorically, they're the ones who should be in the light. They're the ones who are being enlightened with whatever it is we're sharing. So therefore, we should, you don't want to be in the dark. You want to have people be able to see you. But again, more metaphorically, shine the light on the audience, always. I even train, these are little things. You will see tremendous speakers, and I mean tremendous speakers, use the term I'm going to speak about. And even those people, but especially my clients, I have them switch that around to, over the next 30 minutes, you are going to hear, you are going to learn, you are going to discover, whatever words they want to use. But you, the audience, will benefit from this, as opposed to, hey, I'm up here, next 30 minutes, this is what I'm doing. Because frankly, you know as well as I do, who cares? They're not there for me.
Yeah.
They don't care about me. I'm sure they don't want me to go out and get struck by lightning, but they're there for what they get out of being with me. No different than if we go buy a tool. We buy the tool, not who made the tool.
Yeah. That's super important. Yeah.
It's without that, nothing else matters. And that's one of the things we often either forget or refuse to learn.
Yeah. I think one of the things that comes up for me whilst you're saying that is that sometimes I work with speakers, and some of them fairly experienced as well, who struggle to feel that connection. And I think what you're saying is one of the reasons why, because it's very much about them rather than about the audience. They make it about themselves. And so that way things maybe a bit more ego driven, things much more about what I'm getting out of this and what's in it for me. And that's exactly what your audience is after. And like now more than ever, people want to have that relationship. I think that's probably always been the case, but they want to feel that they have relationship to you, and they want to feel they can connect with you on that values level. Like people are being like effectively cancelled left, right, and center because their values are not right, and they're expressing values that aren't fitting with where most people are at these days. And so people want to connect with with values that are on the right path, and with people who are really there for them, not people who are there because they want to edify themselves. That really hopefully should come from being the servant to people. And I said that I agree that in terms of that is what I would classify as leadership, being the servant of the people and giving them what they really need. If you can't answer that what's in it for me question for them as soon as possible in language that says this is about you, then I think you are going to lose people quite quickly, or at least you're going to have all your work ahead of you in terms of developing that connection.
I spoke to a CEO once, not someone I was working with. I was just having a chat with her, and we were talking about what kept her up at night. And I said, I got to believe it's the bottom line and everything that leads into that. And she said, no. She said, every once in a while, but no. She said, It's whether I can lead effectively or not. She said, and sometimes I get into my own hype. I'm the CEO. I have all the answers. She said, when I know I hire people to have the answers, I'm not supposed to have the answers. I'm supposed to know how to lead them and bring them together so the company benefits. And she said, but every once in a while, I think I'm the person that other people think a CEO is.
Right.
And she says, and that's not what a CEO is. I'm like, well, that's a great little lesson.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think very often people do get limited by an identity that they're trying to put out to the world, and like, well, I am this, therefore I have to act and do everything in accordance with this. Otherwise, I might change your opinion of me, and you're going to see me as being something else. And that can be, whilst there may be some benefits to that, that can also be very dodgy ground because it locks you into certain patterns of thinking and behavior that may not be beneficial to your long-term outcomes as well. But it also, I think it cuts you off from real vulnerability with people to be authentically who you are. And so if you find that you feel limitations on being able to present yourself for who you really are, that's where I would be encouraging people to look at, well, what changes could you make that would allow you to be yourself and not feel negatively judged or impacted for that, or to move past that, and what would make it okay. And yeah, I mean, it leads us down a whole different path there. But the authenticity part is a key feature to me as well.
It really is. And it's a word that I think is misunderstood quite often. There's 1,000 different authentic me's, Peter George's. There's 1,000 different authentic Johnny Balls, where we have to be authentic for that particular situation in that particular time. And that's different. Me being on stage, me coaching, being on here, I'm being authentic. I'm being me. I don't speak eloquently, never have, never will. I speak very matter-of-factly. That's the authentic me. If I tried to speak, and it has a lot to do with growing up with a stutter, if I used a word that is 4 or 5 syllables long, I stumble all over it. So I learned to speak extremely matter-of-factly. And that's actually done well for me, keeping things simple over the years. But that's the authentic me. The authentic me at home at night is watching a baseball game with my feet up on the coffee table, probably in my underwear. And as my wife says, acting like a 7-year-old. That's the authentic me at home when I'm relaxing and really don't care what anybody thinks, because the only one's around is my wife.
Right.
And she knows how to put up with me as a 7-year-old. So take that authentic you in that situation, and that will help you communicate with people. Just be yourself for that particular situation. And that works without really trying very, very hard. It comes naturally because it's authentic.
Yeah. Yeah. And yet for many people, it can be quite hard to do. But I think you're absolutely right. We have different uses for different situations, and depending on who we are, but it is about still being true to yourself as best you can. And you don't have to put every aspect of yourself up in front of an audience for scrutiny as well. Some parts are for you in your private life, and some parts are for you in your public life, and they don't have to necessarily cross over at all. One of the things that I know that you have said about making it all about the audience is that you have been working on a book for that as well. How's your book progress going, Peter?
It's coming along, not as quickly as I had anticipated. Last year I said, I used to own a publishing company. I know what this is all about. Well, there was a reason I hadn't written that book yet. It's because I know what it's all about. It can be daunting to write a book.
Right.
And I said, well, with COVID being locked up and everything else, I'll knock this out in 7 months. Yeah, that didn't happen. I'm still working. My goal to have my end of it done, the writing done, is October 31st. And that way it'll be out around the first of the year.
Fantastic. So when the book comes out, what's it going to be called?
The working title is It's All About the Audience. That won't be the final title, I don't think. But as long as I keep it in my mind, that becomes my compass. That everything I'm writing in that book is consistently and constantly talking about it being, here's why you do this, whether it's the artistic side, the scientific side. It's because this is how the audience is going to react to that, or this is what you want to do to help that happen. So as long as I can keep it in mind that it's about the audience and what everything I'm suggesting that someone does, just like I do in my coaching, then the book will be where I want it to be.
Excellent. Well,
I'm,
definitely, yeah.
I'm actually, at someone's suggestion, the final title might be actually my tagline: "Be calm, confident, and credible," and then have it in a subtitle every time you speak in public.
Well, we'd definitely love to stay informed of when the book is available for us to read and check out and find out more about that. I love reading books about public speaking and presentations, especially from people who I know, who I've connected with, who are experts and have been working in the industry for some time as well. Now, you did mention that there is a giveaway available for people who may be tuning in as well, which is 50 public speaking tips. How can people get hold of that?
Very easily. Just go to my website, petergeorgepublicspeaking.com.
Excellent.
It's more than 50 free public speaking tips. They can download it instantly and learn from them. Very simple tips.
And they can come and find out more about what you offer in terms of public speaking training and the likes as well.
Yes.
Excellent stuff. Okay, so great. We'll make sure that the links are in the show notes if you would like to go and check that out and download your 50 plus public speaking tips from Peter. Peter, I always like to ask my guests as well for book recommendations. And if there was one, I do allow people to speak too, one or two books that maybe relate to public speaking or maybe something else, but books that have made an impact on you professionally, personally. If someone says to you, Peter, what's a good book? What should I read? What would you say?
A couple of books, and they are both business books, but they both work with you on a personal level. One is How to Win Friends and Influence People. And I love that because, one, has stood the test of time. Dale Carnegie stood the test of time. And it brings to light that if you want to communicate well, listen.
Yeah.
Instead of concentrate on speaking. And one of the points there is people walk away. If you listen to them, say you're at a party and you listen to them talk, they'll walk away saying, wow, he is a great communicator. I could listen to him all day, where they actually did most of the talking. And the other is E-Myth, or actually E-Myth Revisited. And that goes through systemizing, making things systematic. And it's how franchises grow. It's how McDonald's grew on the backs of 16-year-olds and moms flipping hamburgers. But if you can make things systematic, you can replicate them. Whether you're franchising or not, you want to be able to replicate things because then things run more smoothly. Those two books, and one's much more powerful than the other, but both were essential to me in developing my businesses the way I did.
Yeah, I mean, the E-Myth Revisited is a book that I've read several times, and I do find it very valuable, and often recommend it to people as well for exactly the reasons you're saying. That Michael Gerber, a very good book. And I would say that there are two books that I regularly like to revisit in terms of influence and persuasion, which is a big, the heart of a lot of what I do. And one of them is Cialdini's Influence and Persuasion book, but the other is How to Influence and Influence People. Again, for those reasons, it stands up in terms of actually having influence and persuasion with people. It gives you all those core principles and has been well utilized by many notable people over time. The stuff in the book really works. And there's a few other Dale Carnegie books that I think are well worth checking out as well. But yeah, some great recommendations.
My favorite thing about that book is every once in a while, my wife will say to me, how often have you read How to Win Friends and Influence People? And I say 3 times. And she'll look at me and say, you might want to read it a 4th. And that's when I know I might have been overbearing with someone or something like that. You might want to read it one more time.
That's great. And so just as we wrap things up, I'd like to leave people with, if there was one thing you hope people will remember or take away from listening to this episode, what would it be?
Very simple. It's all about the audience. Always.
Make it about them. Very wise words. Peter, it's been a real pleasure chatting to you today. Thank you for sharing your insights and expertise with us. It's been an absolute joy, and we'll look forward to the release of your book, whatever the final title ends up being as well. Thank you so much, Peter George.
Thank you, Johnny. It's been a blast.